Hey everybody, and welcome to History of the Pokemon World. Yes, this is going to cover the entire history of the Pokemon World as long as you guys don't hate it. So, this is part 1. There's a lot of history, I'm not going to lie. I was looking through it and I was like, "Holy crap." But if you guys like it, let me know. I'll make part 2. If not, please save me the time and I won't make part 2 because I could use all those hours towards something productive like sleep. So it is broken down into 3 parts. Part 1 is the beginning of time and the prehistory. Both of those are pretty, I guess, scarce on information. So I was able to put them together. Part 2 is the recent history of the Pokemon world, and part 3 would cover the contemporary history. So let me give you a little overall timeline here. This is part 1, so we will start with beginning of the universe. Now, here you can see a very, very scarce outline of what is to come. Beginning of the universe of prehistory, like I said, there's not a lot going on there. But I did want to just put in, some of the major events of each, era. Recent history, you'll see a lot of the stuff that is talked about in the games. Everything in here is talked about in the games, but recent history, you'll see a lot of the stuff like, Brass Tower burns down. Like, you're there with the with the burned down tower in gold and silver. Good stuff like that. And then contemporary history is massive, and that would be a huge PowerPoint. So if we make it that far, oh my god. But anyway, I hope you guys like it, and just sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about the history of the Pokemon world. Oh, one final note. The text, anything in text, is like pretty much considered canon. Got the information from Bulbapedia, so it's probably solid stuff. The pictures, I would not trust them even one bit. So let's just keep that in mind. So as far as the beginning of the universe, you have the birth of Arceus, time and space is created, Lake Guardians are created, Earth and Sea is created, and then land masses are created. The little boxes are here. I'll put one of these for each of the 4 different era. It'll give you, a time frame. It'll let you sort things time-wise for, the era. So the birth of Arceus is the beginning of time for the Pokemon world, and then time and space is created a little bit later than that. Then the Lake Guardians are created a little bit later than time and space, and then Earth and Sea, and then land masses. You get the picture. So, birth of Arceus. The very first thing that happens is that this egg appears in a vortex of nothingness and chaos. You just got all this, and then here comes this egg, it's just like bouncing around and shit. And it hatches into that dog-looking thing, which is called Arceus. So, after Arceus has been hatched, he's like, time, space, like nothing's really going on. So, he creates Palkia, Giratina, and Dialga, giving them power over time, space, and antimatter. So, that's important because now we're starting to actually become like, we're starting to form the world, like, the world as we know it, space and time. Without it, it was just like, but now we actually got like, here's space, here's time. Good stuff. However, because Giratina was being a dick, Arceus banished it to the Distortion world. And then Palkia and Dialga successfully, they do what they're told. They follow the rules. They make their respectful universes, their respectful parts of the universe. And then they retreat to their own dimensions afterwards. Yes, they each live in their own dimension. Palkia lives in one in space. Dialga lives one in time. With a point of access being Spear Pillar in Sinnoh, which, as we know if you've played through, Gen 3 games, we've all run into that. Soon after that, Arceus creates Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, which, give knowledge, emotion, and willpower to all living things that will come into existence. Obviously, the only things that are in existence now are, these 3, Arceus, and then Palkia, Dialga, Giratina, if you can, count them in existence, if Giratina is just, like, banished to the Distortion world. But, so he creates these to give willpower and this good stuff to living things that come into existence from now on. You do see these things if you've played through the games at, the bottom of the different lakes. So that's also cool. That's all the lore. You're getting all this lore from years and years and years and generations of passed down information in the Pokemon games that we learn as we play in the game. So I thought that was really cool. I do want to mention, though, that this whole beginning of the universe, it pretty much, talks about everything that's coming into existence. It's very similar to the creation story of, say, the Bible and all those other creation stories out there. It's very similar, universe, then time and space, then, all this good stuff. So we're just following a very linear pattern here. And it has to be like that, especially because, there were no humans around at this time. So they're pretty much just word of mouth. Like, there's no physicals. No one saw this happen. So then next, Arceus goes and creates Kyogre and Groudon. The former is created, so Groudon's created by the pressure of the Kyogre's created by the pressure of the deep sea. Groudon's created deep inside the earth. And then he also creates Rayquaza, who just starts fucking flying around the ozone, and who goes to rest at Spear Pillar. So, man, Spear Pillar is like the place to be right now. So now we have, Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza add to this group of good stuff. Kyogre and Groudon, they start doing their thing. Kyogre starts filling in the sea. Groudon's making land. They're doing like hella like, oh, I can make more land than you. I can make more sea than you. They accidentally run into each other one day, and then they start fighting each other, as you can see from this very elaborate picture down left. Also, as of interest, is that Mew, as a species, may have lived in large numbers at this time. And I mean large numbers. Finally, Rayquaza comes in, plays the role of Arceus, and like quells the two, causing both Kyogre and Groudon to retreat to their separate caverns, which we will run into later in the games as well, where they rest until the events of Generation 3 occur many, many years later. The red and blue orbs are created to prevent their reawakening and are left at Mount Pyre for safekeeping. However, as we all know, that didn't really work out. Now, did it? And finally, we have these land masses. So we had all this fucking random sea and land, and there was no like real like land masses. So Regigigas is made, he is made, and he's tasked to move the continent. So he just grabs all that fucking earth. He just goes and he like pushes it together to form all the regions which we know today. Regigigas also goes and creates Regice, Regirock, and Registeel out of Ice Clan Magma. I don't know, maybe he was lonely. I hope you get the picture on the left. If you do, you can be as happy as that guy in that spacesuit. If you don't, that's what it's from. And the Sinnoh region is created around Mount Coronet. This is how Stark Mountain is created in response to all these shifts, just like a real, volcano's made. Same thing when two plates of earth come together, they like push up, and then bad stuff happens underneath, and then hella pressure, and that's how heat transformed. And then also Arceus creates the Adamant, Lustrous, and Greasious orbs before falling into a deep slumber. So we basically, over this span of time, have just talked about how the entire world was created. The universe and world, time and space, how everything comes into being. Now, is a lot of this speculation by NPCs? Probably, because there's no one around, but it's very similar to creation stories we have today. So I think that's very interesting. And this kind of sets up a lot of the future events we find in the games. So, great. We got through the beginning of the history. Like I said, very straightforward. There was no humans around to really talk about that. Now, all this stuff isn't, it's so long ago, just like in real life, there wasn't a lot of written word. No one's here like, oh, Copernicus writing everything down and stuff like that. No, none of that. This is all, a lot of it's either word of mouth or speculation by NPCs in the game. Or I think we get some stuff from manga and stuff like that. All the good stuff. Now in the prehistory, we have some pretty important stuff. First humans arrive. A lot of species will rise and fall during this period of time. The Kalos War happens, which we hear about in Gen 6. I'm sure we all remember that, because that's the game that just came out. The first writing system is developed, and then Xerneas falls asleep inside a tree. Good stuff. So the first humans, they appear millions of years before Generation 1. That's a ton of time ago. So prehistory here, as you can see, is going to cover a massive amount of time, like a massive chunk of time. The rise and fall of species happen over a large period of time, from 300 million years ago to 1,500 years before Generation 1. That's massive. The Kalos War happens 3,000 years before Generation 5. The first writing system being developed is 1,500 years before Generation ! That should be Generation 1. And then, so that's not even that much time. Think about that. That's not a lot of time whatsoever. 1,500 years. And then Xerneas' slumber is 1,000 years before Generation 6. A lot of the stuff should be familiar to us because of our recent, X and Y. So it's really cool that they were able to fill in pieces like this to the puzzle of the history of the Pokemon world. So let's see where we can get into this. the first humans arrived. So the earliest known prehistoric Pokemon existed at this time. So you got like, it's almost like the dinosaur stage of like the Pokemon world. The Mew population may have sadly begun decreasing at this stage. We don't know why, but they did give way for other Pokemon species, so that's good. And this is, like I said, when the first humans appeared. There's no exact date, but just we can assume they were here. But, Pokemon were there first. Really prehistoric, ancient fossil Pokemon. So 300 million years ago, an ancient version of Genesect was born. And also during this time, Kabuto and Kabutops were found to have lived in the sea. Now, this is pretty cool stuff. None of these pictures are real. They're pretty much speculation or just fan whatever, stuff. But, Genesect was modified by Team Plasma, and they put the cannon on its back. So they think, a lot of fans think that perhaps Kabutops and Genesect are somehow related, as you can see from the pictures. They do look pretty similar. 100 million years ago, species such as Aerodactyl, Lileep, Cranidos, Shieldon, Tortuga, and Archon were all widespread. So that's great. A bunch of all these ancient fossil Pokemon. They all did go extinct, but not before Archon gave rise to bird Pokemon and Tortuga gave rise to turtle Pokemon, which is really cool because you can see from the pictures here that, Tortuga, someone drew a crude way of it evolving, not crude, but, quite probably not accurate way of it evolving into Lapras, Blastoise. There's probably, Torkoal kind of looks like a turtle. And then you have this Archon who's barely flying at all. Like, look at that thing. It's just pathetic. I don't know why no wonder it went extinct. Anyway, 10,000 years ago, that's the last ice age happened. Mamoswine flourished, like that on the left. Look at that freaking unicorn Mamoswine. They later died out after the Ice Age ended, so that's not so good. But yeah. At some point in the distant past, we don't know exactly when, but the Magikarp population mutates due to unknown reasons and becomes weaker. We come from that blarg Magikarp, Spit and Hyper Beam, to virtually worthless in terms of both power and speed. And I'm not done of making fun of Magikarp yet, so feel free to read these, because I thought they were funny. And, okay, moving on. Okay, well, one more, just because I couldn't help myself. But just, I don't even need to say anything. Just look at that thing. Alright, so then after the Iron Age, Regigigas is sealed away in Snowpoint Temple, and the rest of the Regis are sealed away at different locations across Hoenn after years of human worship. So they were kind of seen as gods for a long time by a lot of humans. If you played some of these games, I'm sure you remember having to crack these Braille codes in order to get into the Regi Chamber. I memorized the entire alphabet, but I forgot it now. So they're sealed away after the Iron Age. Then 3,000 years before Generation 6, the Kalos War occurred, which we just found out about in Gen 6 in X and Y. The ultimate weapon was created underneath Geosenge Town, which pretty much ends up wrecking that town, and Az was given eternal life, which is its own story in itself. Don't want to spoil anything. 1,500 years before Generation 1, the earliest known writing system is developed and used at the ruins of Alph, Tanoby ruins, and Solaceon ruins. Archaeologists unsure whether the unknown came first or if the characters came first, but it's assumed that they share some kind of connection. Also, I just wanted to point out that the exclamation mark and the question mark look hella pissed off. Like, the rest of them are just kind of like chilling. And then you have those two down there. Look at that. They're just like, fuck you, man. Like, no, go away. Like, they didn't even become a real letter. They got, like, symbols. Like, that sucks. Yeah, I got you, man. I got you. I feel you. Also, at this time, the Farfetch'd population decreases due to overhunting. I can't blame them. That looks tasty as fuck. And finally, 1,000 years before Generation 6, Xerneas went to sleep in the form of a tree. So if you played through X, I'm sure you got that. I played through Y, so I didn't really know what happened there besides legend say it can share eternal life, and it slept for thousands of years in the form of a tree before its survival. So good stuff happened there. And yeah, that's basically all the prehistory that we have to cover. That is part 1. Like I said, guys, I can make a part 2 and part 3. Part 2 is going to be a lot of that stuff that happened right before the games. They kind of lead up a lot of the background of the games that we have played. And then part 3 is all of the information we go through in the games and the manga. So if you guys want to see more, let me know. Like, comment, just tell me like, hey, Alex, you're awesome. Or like, Alex, you're kind of cool, but the information was cool. Or Alex, you suck, but I wouldn't mind reading part 2 just to make you do more work. Like stuff like that. Just let me know. And I hope you guys liked it. It did take me a long time despite how pathetic it looked. But I had fun. I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. And I hope this stuff is as interesting to you as it is to me because I find it really fascinating. So either way, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in part 2.